4 o'clock on a Sunday morning. And normally the only sort of people that will be awake at this time of day are vicars, putting the finishing touches to their sermons, or that strange brand of insomniac called the lighter upper.
Fortunately for me, it was a warm, if wet, midsummer's morning, and the sky was beginning to glow when I went to the railway centre in Didcot, home of the Great Western Society. There I found Dave Martin preparing to light up the engine 6998 Burton Agnes Hall. And as Dave made the preliminary checks, we heard someone else approaching.
Hi, Chris.
Hey.
Check the water. Brakes. Engine's in mid-gear. Some of the cops are open. Right then, Chris, we're going to put some old oil on this rag. Round on top of the wood. Just here and there. And when we light the wood, it helps it all to burn very quickly and the fire spreads quickly. Right, you got the matches then?
Yep.
Okay, light the cloth then. I'll stick this on the shuffle. Get it going nicely. And in we go. There we go. In about 3 hours, 4 hours, we will have steam. Burning well now. And this is a problem, see, when you get the wind changing, you get the stuff blowing out this way instead of going out that way. There's a few knobs.
Having been at Didcot for 20 years, and now a full-time staff member, who better to talk about steaming up and tell us the lightest tale than Dave Martin?
In this area, the steam engines finished in 1966, and the engine we're on at the moment actually pulled the last scheduled steam train on the western region of British Railways, January 1966. The Hall class engines were first designed by Charles Collett for the Great Western Railway as a development of the two-cylinder 460 engines, although they were more for mixed traffic rather than express passenger trains. There were 200 or so built until about the Second World War. Then the locomotive engineer became Mr. Hawksworth, and he made certain developments to the design, and so this engine 6998 Burton Agnes Hall is actually the modified Hall class, and it was built early in 1949 With a bigger engine, we have to allow about 4-5 hours in the case of the very big engines to light up. It can be done quicker, but if you do that, you get a lot of heat in one place, and the other end of the engine will still be cold. And that causes a lot of stresses and strains, and we have to be very careful about that, otherwise you'll get leaks in the boiler. This engine we lit at 5:30 this morning, and it will be ready for service at 9:30, 10 o'clock.
So what should we look for, Dave?
The water in the gauge glass starts moving gently, and maybe 1 or 2 little drips start coming from some of the joints on the back here of the firebox. And then a little bit later, the magic needle starts to move. Then after that, you'll soon have enough pressure to move the engine. And you wait for the scheduled crew to come and take over.
But after so long at Didcot, doesn't Dave have any ambition to be a driver?
I drove occasionally in the early days of the society, but I dropped out of that side of things, and we have to pass very stringent training and examinations before we're allowed to drive now. First of all, you have to be a fireman, just like the old days. Although in the old days you would be a fireman for perhaps 20, 30 years before you became a driver. But maybe it can be a little bit quicker here. A bit more coal is required. You have to keep looking at it and make sure the fire's burning correctly, and it's going to burn in the corners and right down at the front end of the firebox. In this one it's quite a long firebox, so once the fire is caught well at the back, then we push it forward and get the rest of the fire burning. See, normally you would throw the coal in, but it has to be very carefully placed to start with, so it catches properly. Yes, she's burning nicely now. Light us up, just light the fire. Apart from checking that the engine has got water in the boiler. Really, that's all we have to do. The rest of the checks are done by the fireman and the driver when they come on duty at 8:30. The tender behind the engine, that's the old joke of course, the engine's got a tender behind. The tender carries 4,000 gallons of water when it's full and 4 tons of coal. This would be enough to give the engine a decent run up to Birmingham and back, and that would be in good condition. If, however, the engine was in poor condition, not steaming very well, leaking tubes, then perhaps we'd only reach Banbury and back.
Chris Race, at 13, one of the youngest members of the Great Western Society, is going to light up 1466, a favourite of many members. But Dave is always on hand to give out tips and hand on his years of experience to younger enthusiasts like Chris, a new generation enthralled by that golden age of steam. But what is it that drags a young lad like Chris out of his bed so early on a Sunday morning?
I'm 13 and I've been coming down for about 3 years now. I like these steam engines because I like the sound of them. They smell nice and I like watching them being driven. I hope to be driving myself. This was the first engine the Great Western Society bought with the auto trailer. What is it?
231.
231, and there was a load of schoolboys that put out the appeal for it and that. And after we got this one going, we started buying a little more engines and coaters and all different stuff. You have to be a member to light up, work on the engines or anything else.
So, the future of steam at Didcot seems secure, but only as long as it still holds an appeal for Chris and his friends.
Yeah, this engine, 1466, was built in the 1930s, especially for branch line work, and it ran mostly in Devon, and in fact it ran on what is now the Dart Valley Railway for some time. That wasn't its only location though during its life. There are 75 of them, I think, altogether, spread over the whole of the Great Western system. There were some in this area at Oxford and at Reading. Small tank engine, 2 driving wheels and a trailing wheel behind. The water's carried in the tanks on the side and the coal's carried in the bunker at the back. They were used on the branch line trains, but they could, when occasion demanded, also run at a good speed. And the celebrated place for this was near Gloucester on the Chelford trains, when these engines used to keep up with the express trains on the next door main line. There are 4 still in existence: 1420, 1442, 1450 and this one. Couple of minutes break, cup of tea. The coal we use comes from South Wales. It's not domestic coal. It's Welsh steam coal. There are 1 or 2 collieries still open that we can get it from. It burns very hot and it needs a lot of air draft to make it burn properly. Great Western engines were designed to run on Welsh steam coal because the Great Western area covered the Welsh steam coal collieries. If you burn household coal in these engines, they don't steam nearly so well. If they go to other parts of the country, then the coal they're given is maybe Yorkshire coal or Nottinghamshire coal, and it's much more of a job to make these steam. They kept them in steam for 3 or 4 days, and they are just like a kettle. In fact, in German, the word for the boiler of an engine, locomotive, is Kessel. And just like kettles, they get furred up, they get lime. And about every 4 days, you have to take the wash-out plugs out and squirt water through the boiler for several hours to wash all the lime and scale out. And that puts it out of action for 6 hours, although it doesn't really get cold. And every few weeks there would have to be a more protracted stoppage for more careful checks and maybe repairs.
Come on, Dave.
What about 7, mate? Another couple of hours, these will have to be ready. Every day there had to be engines lit, and when an engine came back in from service, most of the fire that was in it would be thrown out, or it had already been used, because engines were not supposed to come back in on shed with a great big firebox full of coal. No point. Otherwise you just sit there burning coal for no purpose. And coal is, and was, very expensive. So the engine would come in with a minimum of fire, and then it would be left like that until its next duty, maybe 6 hours later. This engine is called Burton Agnes Hall. The Great Western had a policy of naming all their main passenger engines after large country houses. They had the Castle class, pollution at its best. Had other engines named after manors and granges. These were named after halls. They were supposed to be named after engines on the Great Western system. And in the majority of cases this is true, but by the time they built the modified halls they were getting a bit short of names. And actually Burton Agnes is in Yorkshire, so the connection with the Great Western is somewhat tenuous. I'm actually sat on the right-hand side of the engine, the driver's side, the controls, the regulator, for opening up the steam to the cylinders. The reverser for controlling the manner in which the steam is used, also for changing the direction of the engine. The brake which opens the vacuum passageways and let air in. The blower control which increases the draft on the fire. The large ejector which sucks the air out of the vacuum pipes. And then it's the fireman's job to check the water level and the pressure. The Great Western carried on with right-hand drive right up to the end of their design. Most of the other railways, apart from one or two small ones, had left-hand drive, where the driver sat and controlled the engine on the left. The big engine behind us is also named after a large country house. In this case it's Dryslewin Castle in Wales. This engine really, for most of its life, was called Earl Bathurst. The name Earl Bathurst was originally on a very small, old-fashioned looking engine, and the lords who had these engines named after them were a bit upset about this, and they pressed the Great Western Railway to put their names on rather more modern, exciting engines. And so the names of a dozen or so of the newest Castle class engines were taken off, and they were renamed after the Earls that were on the old engines. So Dryslewin Castle was only carried by this engine for about 6 months, and it was renamed in about 1937.
By 8:30, the sleepy railway centre is coming to life, and Dave makes some final checks before handing over to the fireman, Phil Bareham.
Morning, mate. Hello, mate. What have we got here then? Oh, very nice. Yes.
Nothing horrible.
Yeah, plenty of it. Right.
The needle's moved.
Yes, great, yeah.
You've got
Blood pressure.
You've got half a turn on the blower.
Great. Right.
The privilege of driving 6998 today falls to Alan Rose.
Morning, Alan.
But before she can move an inch, he has a very important task to complete. It can take up to an hour at the start of each tour of duty for the driver to complete his checks on approximately 150 different lubricating points, and not all of them easily accessible. The points are protected by a cork. A firm twist keeps them securely in place even when travelling at full speed along the main line. Well, that's the last one, and we're still a good half an hour away from full steam. "1466", a small but powerful tank engine, is now in full steam and stands by to gently push the Burton Agnes Hall, which has no power of its own yet, to the water crane. Before the coming of diesel, the 74,000 gallons of water in the tank atop the coaling stage was pumped from the Provender Pond, which was just across the sidings to the west of Didcot Station. But since the establishment of the railway centre, the tank is now filled in the more orthodox fashion from the water main.
much. Where? Back there?
Yeah, just bring back a bit.
Introduced in the 1930s, auto trains were designed to be driven from either end, without having to turn the engine round. A forerunner of the modern diesel multiple units on today's suburban services. Fireman Alex Daniel.
Well, in the old days, the crews would start off. You'd start off with a basic fireman. He would do trips up and down the line until he became fully conversant with all the signals, stations, and that sort. And it wasn't until he was getting almost to the point of being a pass fireman, that is a driver in times of need, that he would be working on auto trains, because he'd virtually be driving the engine himself with the exception of the regulator. So I'm that sort of person. I'm halfway between being a driver and a fireman, or rather fireman and driver.
The time is just after 9:30. The auto coach finishes its first run of the day in the hands of driver Peter Granston. Burton Agnes Hall, 6998 is at last ready to go out onto the main demonstration line for a day's steaming. It's now been exactly 5 hours since we first met Dave Martin, lighting up in those cold moments before dawn. And there's little more to say. I'm just going to sit back, relax, look, and listen to the sounds of Didcot.
It's doing it to deflect the flames near the end of the firebox, so I can see what it's like down the other end. Because when you get holes down at the front, which allow cold air to come through, and you start losing pressure. So I do that so I can see what I'm doing, what's down at the front of the firebox. Generally when I'm firing, I'm trying to work from the front back, so the coal that hits the front ignites first, and we can't obviously see down that end, and then work backwards, and then finish up at the back. And make life a lot easier for yourself. And it slopes down towards the front, and a lot of the stuff you've got on the back tends to get shaken down the front anyhow. So you tend to put the more on the back and build up around the back corners a lot, and well, this particular sort of thing anyhow. It seems to work for me. So. £225 spare inch where red line is on there, and it's also where the safety valve lifts. That's a steam heat pressure gauge. In the older days they used to use steam to heat the carriages through a pipe on the back of the engine. And that indicates the pressure you've got in the system and the pressure required by these numbers here, depending on how many coaches you've got. That thing there is the water level gauge for the boiler, probably the most crucial thing. It's actually the water level above the inner firebox, because there's an inner one and the outer one, obviously, where the fire burning underneath and the water, and the outside one on the top. And it has to be really inside, preferably in the upper half. If it drops too low, then you run the risk of damaging the firebox. But there's two plugs in the inner firebox that are lead lined, and if the water level drops too low, the lead would melt, and it would let water and steam into the fire, which would be a warning to sort of say, look, it's going too low. All these things are bits and pieces on the top here. That one there is the on-off cock for the steam heat that I was talking about a minute ago, and that there is the actual regulator, regulates the pressure for the steam heat. These three here are also to do with the injector which puts water in the boiler. We've got an ordinary live injector, which is that one which takes steam straight out of the boiler and uses it to force the water from the tender into the boiler. And these two here, which work for a thing called the exhaust injector, which the idea is it takes exhaust steam that's already been used in the cylinder and uses that to put water in the boiler, being more economical. It works somehow.
Line of light.
Please visit our website for news about new productions that are on the way, and you can support my work on my Patreon page. Thank you.